And I'm going to talk real quick about something that's going on Black Friday. Ooh, we got a spicy little GDR here. You know, just chilling on the dyno. It's angry at me. Anyway, we'll get it sorted out. But what I wanted to talk about is dyno procedures, dyno stuff, just about bringing your car to the dyno. And why do I want to talk about that? Well, because on Friday, we're going to be having a dyno day. What's a dyno day? Well, a dyno day is basically where you bring your car to the dyno, and so does about 30 or 40 other people, and we strap them down and do a couple of pulls just to see what kind of power they're making. Everybody hangs out, has a good time, and it's just generally fun. It's not a day for tuning cars. It's not a day for making adjustments, calibration changes, things like that. What it is just a day to show off how much power your car is making. And being that it's November, we should have pretty good boost weather. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about in this video, is what to do when you bring your car to the dyno. So since we have a GTR just kind of sitting on the dyno getting some service done, I will talk about one of the things that you have to do before you bring your car to the dyno, and that's make sure that the car can be strapped down. Now, different dynos have different roller styles, and some have a proud roller like this, a single roller, and some have two rollers in a bucket. Either way, you have to be able to strap the car down. So if we come underneath here, you're not going to really be able to see it, but there are under panels, under trays on the GTRs that really create a major problem when it comes to strapping the car down. Because if I have a strap coming in this way and it comes up, it's going to push on this, and this is carbon fiber, not something you want to end up having to replace because you cracked it trying to strap the customer's car down. Now, is that your fault or is it the customer's fault? Well, that all depends on what the expectations were. If the customer said, dyno my car, and you said, okay, and then you said, oh, I have to pull your under panels off, and the customer says, no, don't do it, I just want you to strap it down with the under panels on, then it's kind of on them. But if you say, I'm going to dyno your car, and I'm just going to strap it down, and you crack a panel, that's on you. Same thing with the front on these. There's under trays that really create problems when it comes to actually getting straps around control arms or whatever you want to attach to hold the car on the dyno. So that being said, if you're bringing your car to the dyno and you have things like under panels, it's a good idea to pull them off before you get to the dyno. Now, probably the shop that you're at can pull them off for you, but keep in mind, on a car like this, it's got to go up in the air, and it takes a decent amount of time to take them off, and then you have to put them back on. So you're probably going to be paying an hour or two in shop labor on top of the dyno charges in order to have that service done. If that's worth it to you, fine. Maybe it's not worth it to you and you'd rather do it in your driveway. Go for it, save yourself some money. Other cars that have similar issues, a lot of BMWs have similar issues, as well as a lot of Audis have similar issues where they have under panels and flat bottoms and things of that nature. Now, this isn't the car I'm tuning this morning, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it off the dyno and get the car that I am going to be tuning on the dyno, and I can show you what else you need to check before you bring your car to the dyno. Well, we're already strapped down. I'll show you the unstrapping probably. I actually was doing some training for the guys that are going to be running the dyno day, how to strap cars. But effectively, this video is mostly about what to do when you bring your car to the dyno and not necessarily how you strap it. But if you're bringing your car to a dyno and they strap it in a way that's not similar to this, you might want to ask some questions before they run it. Effectively, the way I strap cars is I put two straps pulling the car forward, and I do those first, and I do them first for a reason, and I'll show you that in 1 second. So first I strap the front and pull the car forward, and then I strap the back and I pull the car backwards, again with straight straps. The reason I do the front first is if for some reason the e-brake or whatever's holding the car on the dyno was to fail while I was strapping the car, and I was strapping the back ones first, that's going to pull the car this way, which means that car is going to be driving through the parking lot under its own power, and they can get up to some decent speed, and I wouldn't want to crash into that Focus RS or that sweet Catfish Camaro or the pallet of whatever packing material that is. So for that reason, we always strap the front first, because the front is going to cause less damage if the car comes off the roller and decides to drive through the shop here. More than likely it would actually just stop right there and just kind of fall into that bucket and no damage at all. If it did bounce that, the front end, which this one doesn't even have a bumper, but the front bumper might hit the fan rack, which is more than likely again going to stop the car because it has no momentum, and it's probably not going to do any damage. It's just plastic here. Maybe if the metal hit, you might scratch some low paint or something, but not super likely. So then after I get the car strapped straight on the dyno, we're just going to drive the car a little bit on the dyno just to kind of shimmy it, so that if you loaded it up crooked, you know, one way or the other way, just a hair, you're just going to let the car straighten itself out. Once the car is straightened out, you stop it, and then you cross strap it. And the cross straps keep the car straight on the dyno. They're not really doing a lot of work as far as holding the car on the dyno. They're mostly just holding it from going side to side. These are the straps that are doing the work, the straps that come directly out and pull forward, and then the straps in the back that hold the car backwards. Now, there's actually less force on those than you might think. Oh, jeez. I don't know what that monster was, but we're not going to talk about that. Whoa. So these straight straps are the ones that are doing the most work, and they do need to be rated for a decent amount of force, but not as much as you might think. These effectively are just holding the weight of the car plus whatever torque the car is making to actually pull itself forward on the roller, which isn't as much as some people would think. So a strap like this that's rated at 2,000 pounds on two of them is probably sufficient. You do want to look at the straps load rating that's nominal versus peak, and make sure that you're using the working load, the nominal load, not just peak load. I don't actually remember what these are rated for, but these are actually made by Racetech, the seat manufacturer, for doing dynos and trailers and things. And then these ones are actually made by Dynojet. They're a little older, a little bit haggard, but they still work great. I have some heat straps, DEI strap covers. If you're close to an exhaust, make sure that your straps are being covered. But again, this video is not really about how to strap your car to the dyno as much as what to do to your car before you come to the dyno. So we're going to go through that now. First and foremost, we got to make sure that this car is safe to be driven on the dyno. What's that mean? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the oil. We're going to make sure that the oil is at the full mark. If it's below the full mark, we're going to get it topped off. The next thing to do is to check and make sure that your wheels are attached to your car. Now, a lot of people have never checked the torque on their lug nuts, so before you bring your car to the dyno, I would strongly recommend checking the torque, making sure that all your wheels are torqued properly. While we're on the topic of wheels, let's talk about the tires. Now, your tires need to be inflated. I have a lot of guys, especially rear-wheel drive, big power guys, that like to bring their cars to the dyno with basically flat tires. Well, it needs traction. Well, the dyno has nice knurling, and typically your flat tires just create more issues than they do solutions. So get them inflated. Manufacturers recommended tire pressure is fine, even a little bit above is fine. The dyno doesn't actually create a lot of tire heat. This is a big metal roller. It likes to suck the heat out of things. So getting tires hot is actually kind of hard. And because of that, having more tire pressure actually allows that tire to get heat faster. It's going to help. So make sure your tire pressure on these Subarus, I usually run about 35. Also make sure that your alignment is at least decent. It doesn't need to be perfect, but if the car is trying to drive all kinds of directions on the dyno, your dyno operator is going to have a bad time, and you might just kick your car off the dyno. The next thing on tires is make sure there's no cords showing. Make sure you got good tread. Again, bald, it's fine. Cords, bad. We've got metal. If we've got metal coming out of your tire, We got metal on the dyno. That's going to create sparks. If you have any kind of leaks, or you know, you could create fire really fast. It's a closed environment. You're not driving away from it, so the fire is going to happen at your car, and that's not ideal. That being said, anything that's going to be hot, you want to make sure is properly heat wrapped, properly away from exhausts, components, things like that. Hoses, wires, cables. Just make sure that any of your hot parts, like the downpipe, the catalytic converter, whatnot, have plenty of distance between anything that could potentially catch on fire. On the dyno, you don't necessarily have as much airflow around the body of the car as you do on the street to cool components. And because of that, things like catalytic converters that get really hot have a much higher probability of lighting wiring or vacuum lines or just whatever that's near them on fire. So again, make sure that everything is cleared and secure. On the topic of things being loose in the engine bay, you also want to make sure that your drive belts are clear of everything, that everything is going to be, everything that can move, at least if it's moving, it's not going to like end up in a drive belt or end up in an axle or end up somewhere else. Your dyno operator is probably going to install a boost pickup if possible on your car. Just let them do that where they decide to put it. If you're putting it on there, just again make sure that you're not down where it's going to get sucked into anything. Try to like kind of loop that up top or something away from components. If the hood's going to be shut, make sure that when the hood shuts, the hose doesn't get stuck. Same thing with tachometer pickups, things like that. If they have them in your car, that they're free and clear of potential hazards. The next few things are more just engine related, health related items. Spark plugs. If you're getting your car tuned or even just doing dyno pulls, you need to make sure that your plugs are fresh and properly gapped. You'll save yourself a ton of time. Dyno operators replacing spark plugs on the dyno typically don't do you any favors. They're going to charge you probably full book time regardless of what it takes, which on Subarus can be 2 to 4 hours depending on the car. You probably don't want to pay an extra 4 hours of labor. They may even charge you, I don't do this, but some tuners do, they may actually charge you dyno rate for that labor, which can be upwards of, on some tuners, upwards of $300 an hour to install spark plugs on your car. Again, I don't charge that, I just charge shop rate, but a lot of tuners, if they're backed up, it's not their fault that your car isn't working, so they want to get paid for the amount of time that the car is on the dyno. So you got two choices: either get your car off the dyno and reschedule, you're probably going to lose your deposit, something like that, or let's fix it on the dyno, which they're going to want to make money off of it and they're going to charge you the full amount. I mean, realistically, tuners aren't in business to do you favors, they're in business to be in business and to make money. And if they've got a stack of 6 cars to tune that day, even if they have a stack of 3 cars, 2 cars, whatever to tune that day, fixing your car on the dyno probably wasn't on their list of things to do. So it's not been scheduled that way, and as such, they're obviously going to want to get paid for the time that they spend. Whether you think that's fair or not, that's a whole nother discussion, but that's definitely one of the most common mechanical problems I see on these cars. Is I'll start doing a tune, and 2 pulls in, we have a misfire at wide open throttle, or even 3 or 4 pulls. Once we start raising the boost, we start finding misfires, and we have to replace spark plugs. On this car, this FA20, spark plugs are an absolute nightmare. This one, fortunately, this side is kind of open and free, but this side is not. So doing plugs on them can definitely take some time. The next thing, like I said, I checked the oil, but you're going to want to make sure that your oil is fresh, that your oil filter is fresh, and it's all topped off. Sometimes people have never driven their car to redline, and they've never driven their car to redline 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, which is what's going to happen on the dyno potentially. So you want to make sure that everything is as healthy as possible going into it to get the best results. On that note, the next thing that people frequently do is they drop their car off for a tune with effectively no fuel. So if we look here on this car, I've got, we're not even a quarter of a tank. Well, luckily this is an FA20 and these cars get really good mileage, but this is barely enough fuel to tune the car. Again, we're wide open throttle, doing wide open throttle pulls and doing a fair number of them. Odds are we're going to burn through most of that fuel before this tune is over. The other thing about it is, again, like I'd stated earlier, we don't have the greatest cooling about the chassis of the car while it's on the dyno, and because of that you may end up with fuel temperatures going up really high. Normally you'd have airflow under your gas tank to help cool the fuel off, but on the dyno we don't have as much airflow, especially underneath the car, to try to cool things off like fuel. So if fuel temperature goes up, that means that the fuel becomes less dense. And there are, in some vehicles, fuel temperature compensation, but not all vehicles, and some vehicles don't do it very well. And as such, you might end up with tuning the car on the dyno. Hot fuel temps could result in having a major change when you get off the dyno and go drive the car. This is a direct injected car, so your fuel temp isn't as critical, but on a return style STI, you can see fuel temps make a pretty major difference, especially on ethanol. I see even a bigger difference. So it's a good idea to make sure that your tank is full or half full, or somewhere above a quarter tank at a minimum. This one's just over an eighth of a tank. It is what it is, but ideally we would like to see more fuel in the car before we tune it. Another super important thing, make sure you don't have any leaks. Some dyno operators, again, I'm not as thorough on this as I should be, but they charge what's called a cleaning deposit. And if your vehicle leaks any fluids on the dyno, they will keep that deposit. And some of those dynos charge a very hefty deposit. Some charge a very small deposit. Either way, you don't want to get hit with extra charges because your car leaked oil or transmission fluid or whatever on the dyno. The fact that we don't have great airflow under the car, if you have fluids leaking on the dyno and you have hot exhaust components and things like that, it very well can cause a fire hazard. And again, if we're on fire inside this room, like, we have sprinklers, but you don't want them to go off. It's definitely not going to be ideal, and I guarantee you if they do go off, the dyno operator's not going to be super happy with you. So let's keep your car not on fire, let's keep the fluids in the car, and let's make sure that everything is clean and tidy. Again, I've never charged anybody a cleaning deposit, but I have had radiator caps fail, radiators burst, I've had oil leaks, I've had fuel leaks, and I have seen videos where fuel leaks caught on fire on the dyno. So again, make sure you don't have any leaks and you'll have the best experience. The final and most oddly overlooked thing is make sure if you're having your car tuned, you bring your tuning device if you have one, or at least speak to the tuner ahead of time to find out what they need from you in order to tune the car. If your car is tuned on one of these access ports and you didn't bring your access port, guess what you're not getting that day? A tune, or you're going to be buying another one of these. And that's definitely not ideal. Now, if you're using something more unique than an access port, it's probably a good idea to bring the cables as well. These just use a standard micro USB, so it's not that big of a deal. Your tuner should have a micro USB laying around, but if your tuning device takes a weird serial cable or something of that nature, bring it with you. Or again, talk to your tuner and find out if he has one or they have one. If they don't have the device, then, or the cable, then again, you're probably not going to be getting tuned that day. Things like the Hollies use a very specific CAN cable. They don't just use a USB. A lot of Motec systems use weird proprietary CAN cables depending on which one it is. There's just a lot of devices throughout the years that have had proprietary cables, and if you don't have those cables and your tuner doesn't have those cables, then you're not getting tuned. Now, to say that the tuner should have those cables is, yes, they should, if they tune a lot of that, but a lot of times you're getting something kind of unique or one-off. Make sure you have your cables. It'll save you and the tuner a ton of time. Yeah, so that's really it. Again, check your oil, check your spark plugs, check for loose components, check your wheel torque, check your tire pressures, and make sure that your car is in good, healthy operating condition. On Subaru's mass airflow metered cars, we do a smoke check, basically where we put pressurized smoke in the intake system to look for leaks. We do that before we tune the cars, not necessarily required before you run the car on the dyno just to do dyno pulls. But if you're tuning the car, again, it's a good idea to have everything working as well as possible. The other thing, when you're tuning the car, we often see little things that aren't working properly, like mass airflow meters, fuel pumps and fuel filters are often clogged. So making sure that all those things are clean and in good working condition will just make your tune go smoother. After that, just have fun with it. You know, this is your opportunity to ask the tuner questions about your car. This is what tuners do for a living. This is what dyno operators do for a living. You know, I've tuned tens of thousands, probably well over 20,000 cars in the 15 years that I've been doing this, and I've seen everything. Not everything, but I've seen most things, and I have a wealth of information to share with a customer about their build, their goals, you know, what they're planning on doing with the car, maybe what they should have done differently, maybe what they should do in the future. Ask your tuner those questions. You have them for whatever time you've booked out. Use it. That being said, if you ask them too many questions, they may not be able to get your tune done. So kind of, you know, weigh back and forth between, are you asking questions that are relevant, or are you just chatting their ear off? Because time is money, and if I've got 3 hours on the dyno and I spend 2 of it talking to the customer, we're probably not going to get the tune done. But if I spend 2.5 hours and you got an extra half an hour, ask me questions. You know, let's talk about your build. Let's get as much information into you as possible. And yeah, that's how you be successful in this world. That's how you can be successful in your build, in your goals, in your dreams. Yeah, and then I guess the final note is just remember that the dyno is a tool, and it's not necessarily a standard. There are a lot of different types of dynos, and the rooms that they're in also play an important part in what kind of power numbers your car puts down. So don't stress if your car makes 10 less horsepower than it should, and don't necessarily celebrate if it makes 10 more than it should, because there's a possibility that it's just making what it's making on that day and it's not really relevant to much else. Like I said, the dyno is a tool, and so when we're tuning the car, obviously the car is on the dyno, one pull to the next I can see gains. But 6 months from now, 12 months from now, there are corrections, there are things that we do in order to make the numbers more standardized, but it's not perfect. So just don't stress out if your numbers are a little high or a little low. Yeah, like I said, have fun with it. Enjoy your time on the dyno, take videos, ask questions, use it as the opportunity to talk to the tuner. If it's a quick dyno day, they may not have a lot of time to talk, but hey, they might have plenty of time. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys can take some of this with you to your next dyno outing.